Welcome to Property Wealth System A to Z on property investment. So today we are going to be talking to you about C for commercial. Who are Property Wealth System? Well, we're a collective of professional property investors who are helping other people achieve their goals through property via education.
So whether you're just starting out in property or whether maybe you've got a portfolio looking to grow and move up the ladder in property, then we are here to help.
My name's Rick.
And I'm Nick, and we are both mentors of Property Wealth System. We've both been training other people in property for the last 10 years or so. My background is from the corporate world, in recruitment, before I got into property and built my own portfolio. Before we get started on this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.
So what is commercial? Commercial property is anything that is not a residential dwelling.
So the kind of things we're talking about here are what you might find on your typical high street, things like shops, pubs, clubs, or something a bit more quirky, maybe like churches.
Think about your average town centre location. What sort of things might be closing down at the moment under some sort of financial pressure and suitable for conversion? So think about warehouses, think about garages, think about offices and other things that can be converted.
So why do we think it's a good time to look at commercial property as a strategy? Well, have a think about what's happening in the world of retail, particularly at the moment. Your typical high street, lots of changes going on, big shift to online. So your traditional high street is changing and morphing into something else. So look for some of those opportunities where we can repurpose some of those units that were retail outlets back into residential.
While some might see that it's sad that the retail space is closing on your average high street, it does give these areas an opportunity to reinvent itself, particularly now as we see a move towards commercial turning into residential. It's also an opportunity for some of the commercial space to perhaps be changed and adapted so it's better suited for today's needs.
And in the world of commercial property, what we're actually finding at the moment is the government are quite behind this kind of activity. So, they don't want to see high streets go to ruin. So they are quite supportive of changes to the high street, particularly when it's turning things like offices into residential or empty retail units back to residential. And in this way, they've actually relaxed a lot of the permitted development rights around this kind of development, which means that you can go ahead and you can develop in certain areas, you can develop offices or empty retail units back into residential without even needing planning permission.
Another reason that we like looking at commercial property is we tend to be looking at sort of more quirky deals. So it's the sort of investment that your average buy-to-let investor, the amateurs, won't be looking at. The great thing about working with the agents is they become your partner. They work with you because they need to find creative solutions to try and get these properties sold.
Also with commercial property, there's a lot more variety, and that makes it much more interesting for the investor. So with buy-to-let, it's fairly standard, the type of thing we're looking at. When it comes to commercial, there's a whole world of opportunity. So we can be looking at things like pubs, working men's clubs, maybe churches, other bits of land that can make things a little bit more interesting for us.
As well as residential conversions, you also have the option at looking at commercial space and repurposing it. So for instance, can we take an existing office that's perhaps tired, has no tenants in it, it's perhaps unsuitable for today's market? Could we take one big office and perhaps chop it up into smaller units so it's suitable for perhaps smaller businesses or perhaps flexible working opportunities?
Other things like warehouses, you can find maybe big old warehouses, quite hard to let in this current climate, but we're applying a bit of strategy. We can chop those warehouses down into smaller units to maybe take advantage of the e-commerce space where you get a lot of single operators just looking for smaller units where they can run their e-commerce business from. You may find with commercial property that it's probably not maybe going to be your first deals. Lenders in this market do really look for a bit of experience, a bit of track record. So this is something you can aspire to.
The great thing with commercial is you can be really creative with your funding options. So firstly, you can look at things like using your pension to buy commercial property. You can also look at controlling properties using something called an option, where you can have control of a property for as little as £1.
Rick, I think you've got an example of just that strategy.
I do. We didn't quite control a property for £1. We bought recently an antique shop, which we're converting into a 12-bedroom, 12-bathroom HMO. We controlled the property for £2,000 on an option whilst we secured planning. During that period, we weren't using our money into the deal, just £2,000, and once we secured planning, we could proceed and execute on the deal.
When it comes to commercial property, it's really, really essential that you do really understand and know what you're doing. So it's vital that you have a really, really strong team in place and that you have a really clear plan for what you're intending to do with the property.
Really important that you know how you're going to finance the deal. Far too often we see people biting off more than they can chew and then realising they don't have the experience to actually execute on the deal.
So that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed this brief insight into commercial property. Next week, we'll be looking at D for doing the numbers. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.